I never imagined my marriage would shatter over a dog, but here we were. Me, standing in the kitchen in my pajamas, fighting back tears, while Bryce, my husband of 10 years, zipped up a suitcase as if he were leaving for a business trip. Only, this time he wasn't coming back. His cold eyes met mine, and without hesitation, he said, "I'm taking Zeus. You get the kid." No explanation. No goodbye. No thanks for the years we'd spent together. Just, "You get the kid." Zeus. Our golden retriever was part of our family. He'd been with us long before our son Eli was even born. He'd slept at the foot of our bed, played with Eli for hours, and even rescued socks from the laundry basket like it was his job. Yet Bryce claimed him as if he were just some piece of luggage. I stood there frozen, unable to speak. Then, like a shadow, Joan, Bryce's mother, chimed in, her fake pearls gleaming in the doorway. She stood there with a smug grin, as if this was some kind of game. "Well," she chuckled, "at least the dog's trained." They both laughed. Laughed as if my son was some broken toy, and I was the one left with the losing hand. It felt like the air was sucked out of the room. I didn't scream. I didn't cry in front of them. I just turned, grabbed Eli's drawing off the counter, one he made of the three of us holding hands under a giant sun, and walked past them, my heart breaking. Eli, just 9 years old, sat cross-legged in the next room, coloring quietly with his headphones on. He didn't see the storm that was ripping our family apart, not yet. In that moment, I made a promise to myself. He would never believe that he was the problem. Bryce could take the dog. Joan could think she had won. I'd take the kid. I wanted the kid, and I was going to protect him from the people who laughed at his pain. But that's not where the real story begins. The real story starts a few weeks later, in court. That's when my sweet, quiet, observant son Eli stood up in front of the judge, cleared his throat, and asked, "Mom, can I read what Dad texted me last night?" The entire courtroom went dead silent. The judge raised an eyebrow. Bryce's lawyer went ghost white. Joan, sitting smugly in the back, looked like she had swallowed a stone. And in that moment, my 9-year-old son held more power than any lawyer ever could. He held the truth. For the first time, the adults in that room had no choice but to listen. But let me take you back, so you can understand why that moment changed everything. It wasn't just one bad fight. It wasn't just one toxic comment. It was years of quiet erasure, years of gaslighting. Bryce made me feel like I was always overreacting, always too emotional, always the one ruining everything. It was subtle, but it was constant. When Eli cried after Bryce yelled, it was my fault for not teaching him to toughen up. When I asked for help, I was nagging. When I finally said I wanted out, Bryce told people I was unstable, that he was just trying to hold the family together, and everyone believed him. Why wouldn't they? He was charming, smooth-talking, and had that perfect smile, the kind of guy who could call waitresses sweetheart and get away with it. But Eli saw it all. He saw how Bryce's face changed the second we were behind closed doors. He noticed how I'd stop mid-sentence whenever Bryce entered the room. He saw that I never laughed anymore. Not really. And when Bryce walked out, taking Zeus with him, Eli didn't cry. Instead, he sat beside me that night, holding Zeus's old collar, and said, "I don't think Dad likes us very much." That was the beginning of the end. And unknowingly, that was when the truth began to surface. People often picture a custody battle as chaos, screaming, slamming doors, police being called. But that's not how mine started. Mine began in silence. The silence that followed when Bryce left with the dog and a smirk. It wasn't noisy, just empty. Every drawer he emptied, every coat he took off the hook, echoed through the house like a whisper saying, "He's gone." At first, Eli didn't ask many questions. He just kept drawing, superheroes, sunsets, and sometimes pictures of Zeus with a cape. I pretended everything was fine. I overcompensated. Homemade lunches with handwritten notes, extra bedtime stories. I even let him fall asleep in my bed most nights because he was afraid of the dark again. He hadn't been afraid of the dark since kindergarten, our little two-bedroom. Apartment wasn't fancy, but it was ours. I painted Eli's room light blue, strung little star-shaped lights around the ceiling. He loved it when the stars watched over him. I worked from home as a freelance designer, taking on odd jobs while Eli was at school. It didn't pay much, but it was enough to get by, and it gave me time with him. I wasn't about to give that up for anything. The mornings were the hardest. That's when I'd find Eli already dressed, sitting quietly at the table, staring at his cereal box but not eating. He used to bounce around, asking 100 questions about dinosaurs and space, and how many teeth sharks really had. Now, he was just still. I knew he was hurting, but I didn't know how to fix it. Bryce and I had met when I was 23, working at a print shop. He came in to get business cards and left with my number. A year later, we were married. By the time Eli was born, I had already started making excuses for him. At first, it was small things. He'd forget to pick me up after work. He'd joke about me letting myself go after giving birth. He called it banter. I called it a bad day. But those bad days turned into a pattern. He controlled the money, the thermostat, even the way I parented. When Eli got a cold, Bryce accused me of letting him get soft. When Eli had nightmares, Bryce told him, "Boys don't cry." That's when I started sleeping with the baby monitor on. Not to hear Eli, who didn't cry out anymore, but to hear Bryce's voice. People didn't see that side of him. They saw the Bryce who hosted backyard barbecues and gave funny toasts. Joan especially thought Bryce could do no wrong. She once told me, "You're lucky he puts up with your moods." I remember staring at her, wondering how many other women had been silenced with those exact words. I was exhausted, not just from parenting, but from pretending we were a happy family, pretending I wasn't shrinking inside my own home, pretending Eli was okay. The final straw wasn't dramatic. No cheating scandal, no screaming match. It was a Tuesday afternoon. Bryce came home late, tossed his keys on the counter, and asked if Eli had finished his spelling homework. I said, "Yes." He said, "Good, because I don't want him ending. Up like you, barely scraping by." He said it casually, like he was talking about the weather. And then, without missing a beat, he walked into the next room to check his emails. That night, I waited until he had fallen asleep. I slipped out of bed, walked to the bathroom, locked the door, and sank to the floor in tears. Not because I was sad, but because I finally understood. I was done. 3 more weeks passed before he left. But when he did, he didn't leave quietly. He took Zeus, his last shred of dignity, and any remaining sense of decency, saying, "I've got the kid." Those words kept echoing in my mind. You get the kid. It felt as if Eli was just some item being passed around in a divorce, a commodity up for grabs. But the truth was, I wanted him because he was kind, thoughtful, and perceptive in ways most adults couldn't understand. If Bryce couldn't see that, then Eli didn't need him. What I didn't know at the time was how much Eli had been processing. I didn't realize the weight he had been carrying, but I would learn soon enough, and so would the judge. The first custody hearing was in a cold, sterile office downtown. Beige walls, leather chairs, and a fake fern in the corner, designed to make everything feel neutral. Bryce showed up 10 minutes late, wearing a blazer and flashing a smile, as though he were the one being interviewed. Joan trailed behind him, uninvited, but smuggled herself into the waiting area, offering homemade banana bread to the receptionist, like we were one big happy family. I sat across from Bryce, watching him perform the role of the concerned father, polite, calm, and talking about his commitment to Eli's well-being. Every word he spoke made my skin crawl, because I knew who he really was behind closed doors. He wanted shared custody, a week-on, week-off arrangement. I was stunned. This was the man who hadn't called Eli once since he left. No FaceTime, not even a text. When he came to pick up his mail, he acted like a stranger, never asking how Eli was doing. And now he wanted half of Eli's life handed back to him. Like it was a simple transaction. I couldn't hold back. He doesn't even check on his son. He doesn't show up. Why does he get half? I demanded. Bryce leaned back, smiling. Because I'm his father. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about Eli. It was about control, about winning, about image. And Bryce wasn't doing it alone. Joan had started inserting herself into everything. She'd email me passive-aggressively, asking if Eli was eating enough vegetables or commenting on how puffy he looked in his school photos. Then there were the surprise school drop-offs. Bryce would show up unannounced, wearing his number one dad hoodie, waving to the other parents, handing Eli granola bars as if he were the world's best provider. Eli, on the other hand, looked confused and uncomfortable. He stopped smiling in the mornings. At home, I noticed a shift. Eli was asking tougher questions. Why does Dad say you don't want me to see him? Did you tell him I'm scared of his house? Is it bad to cry when I miss Zeus? That last one broke me. He missed Zeus so much that he started drawing him into family photos. But now Zeus was always standing between Eli and me, as if protecting him. One night, Eli came to me and whispered, Dad told me not to tell you, but he says you cry too much, and I'll be messed up if I live with you all the time. I sat on the floor in the hallway and just held him. I didn't cry, though I wanted to. I couldn't let Bryce have the satisfaction of seeing me break. Instead, I started documenting everything. I kept a journal, saved screenshots of every manipulative message, and made copies of the few emails Joan carelessly sent, like the one saying, if Eli doesn't learn discipline, he'll end up like your side of the family. Meanwhile, Bryce grew bolder. He sent Eli texts like, your mom says no again, surprise, or wish I could see you more, but your mom wants to keep you away. It was textbook alienation. But explaining that to a judge felt impossible, like trying to prove the existence of a ghost. My lawyer, Denise, was clear but cautious. Unless there's abuse or solid evidence, judges tend to favor balance. They won't favor one parent without it. The word evidence haunted me. Most of the damage Bryce inflicted wasn't through physical bruises or threats. It was in the tone of his words, in the lies he spread, and in the slow erosion of Eli's trust. Eli was being eroded. Still, the court date was set. I had 2 weeks to prepare. I spent every night combing through our text messages, organizing dates, and carefully building a case, however quiet. Then one night I went to check on Eli. He was sitting up in bed, pale, holding his tablet. Mom, he said, his voice barely audible. I don't think Dad meant for me to see this. He handed me the screen. My heart sank as I read the messages. There, in black and white, was Bryce texting someone, maybe his new girlfriend, ranting about how Eli was soft and how he'd fix him once I get more custody. The worst part? He said, can't wait to be done with that brat so I can get my real life back. Eli looked at me, eyes glassy, and asked, is it my fault he doesn't want me? I felt my whole body go cold. No, I replied firmly. No, baby. You didn't do anything wrong. You're perfect. Your dad is the one who's broken. That night, I knew we had our evidence, not just for the judge, but for Eli. He needed to be heard, and soon he would be. When Eli showed me those texts, something inside me changed. Up until that point, I'd been fighting just to survive the storm. But now, I wasn't just reacting, I was ready to fight back. I sat there on Eli's bed, holding the tablet, reading those hurtful words over and over. Can't wait to be done with that brat. He cries like a baby, just like his mom. Bryce had sent those messages to Eli by mistake, probably meant for someone else. Maybe his new girlfriend or one of his friends who was listening to his sad single dad stories. But it didn't matter anymore. It was out in the open, and Eli had seen it. I took a breath and looked at my son. His face was pale, trying to shrink into the blanket, as if he wished he could disappear. He didn't want comfort. He wanted the truth. "Did you read all of it?" I asked. He nodded. "I didn't want to, but I couldn't stop. I thought maybe I was bad." "No," I said immediately. "You are not bad. Eli, he's wrong. He's so wrong." And I meant it. Every word. This wasn't just about winning custody anymore. This was about breaking a cycle. Making sure Eli didn't grow up thinking that love was something you had to earn by being quiet, by pleasing people who didn't deserve you. So I printed the screenshots, labeled them by date, and backed them up on a flash drive. The first thing I did the next morning was call Denise, my lawyer. Her voice tightened as I read her some of the messages. "This is big," she said. "This could change everything. But are you sure you want Eli to speak?" That stopped me in my tracks. I hadn't even considered putting him on the stand. The thought of it made my stomach turn. Eli was only 9, and I didn't want him caught up in the courtroom drama, questioned by strangers, forced to look at his dad and relive all the pain. But then I remembered something Eli had said after Bryce left. "You always tell me to speak up when something's not right. Is this one of those times?" He wanted to speak. That was the difference. I sat Eli down at the kitchen table with some juice and graham crackers and asked gently, "Eli, you don't have to do this, but if you want to talk to the judge, if you want to tell him how you feel, I'll be right there the whole time." Eli looked at me, more serious than I'd ever seen him, and said, "Can I show him what Dad wrote? The judge needs to know the truth, right?" I blinked back tears. "Yes, baby." He does. The next few days were a blur of preparation. Denise arranged for the evidence to be officially submitted, we created a timeline, and filed for a formal statement from Eli to be reviewed before the hearing. Meanwhile, Joan started showing up at Eli's school again. One day, she tried to hand him a gift during dismissal, an action figure and a card that read, "Daddy's just fighting for you." Eli gave it to me and asked, "Why does it feel like a trap?" "Because it is," I replied. I reported it, and Denise filed a complaint. As always, Bryce texted, accusing me of using Eli against him, of weaponizing a child. Classic projection, but I didn't take the bait. Instead, I focused on Eli. We talked every night, not about the court case, but about how he felt, what scared him, what made him strong. No sugarcoating. No false promises. The night before the hearing, Eli couldn't sleep. He lay beside me in the dark, whispering, "What if the judge doesn't believe me?" I turned to him, brushed his hair back, and said, "The truth doesn't need to be loud to be real. Just speak from your heart. That's all you need to do." He didn't say anything after that, but he reached for my hand and held it tightly. The next morning, we got dressed quietly. I put on a navy dress and simple earrings. Eli wore his school uniform, freshly ironed with his favorite red sneakers. He told me they made him brave. Outside the courthouse, Denise met us, briefcase in hand, her face solemn. Bryce was already there, pacing in a charcoal suit, flanked by Joan and what I assumed was his lawyer. He glanced at me once, but I didn't look back. We signed in and took our seats. I leaned down and whispered to Eli, "You still want to do this?" He nodded. "I'm ready." For the first time in a long time, I believed we were going to be okay. Because this time, the truth wasn't just written down. It was about to speak. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Beige walls, stiff chairs, the faint smell of old coffee and paper. But it was the silence I remembered most, the thick, waiting silence before the judge entered. the kind where you can hear the rustle of papers, your own heartbeat. Eli sat next to me at the petitioner's table, his feet just swinging above the floor, trying to look brave. He held his small notebook in his lap, the one where we had practiced his statement. His red sneakers peeked out from under his pressed pants, and I could see how tightly he clenched his fingers. Across the room, Bryce sat upright in his tailored suit, perfectly rehearsed. He glanced at Eli once, but quickly looked away. Joan sat behind him, her lips tight, eyes scanning the room like she was the one being judged. When the judge entered, everyone rose. He looked down at the file, the case number, the names, and the stack of documents we'd submitted. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. After the formalities, Bryce's lawyer stood to speak first. She was polished and confident, laying out the narrative I had heard 100 times. Mr. Carter seeks equal parenting time, emphasizing routine and emotional balance for the child. He has demonstrated consistent interest in Eli's well-being. Consistent interest, I thought, clenching my jaw. He hadn't called Eli on his birthday, hadn't asked about his allergies, didn't even know Eli still slept with a nightlight. Stayed silent. Then it was our turn. Denise stood with measured calm. Your Honor, we are requesting primary physical and legal custody. We have submitted documented evidence showing concerning communication and behavior on Mr. Carter's part, including messages sent to the minor. The judge raised an eyebrow. To the child? Denise nodded. Yes, Your Honor. And with the court's permission, Denise continued, Eli would like to speak. A real pause. The judge leaned slightly forward. Are you sure, son? Eli glanced up at me. I gave him the smallest nod, and he slowly stood. I want to say something, he said, his voice soft but clear. The judge gestured him forward. Come on up, Eli. Take your time. Eli walked slowly to the front of the courtroom, his notebook in hand. His hands trembled, but he stood tall, taller than I'd ever seen him. He opened the notebook and took a breath. My dad sent me some messages. I wasn't supposed to see them, but I did. And I think the judge should know. The room went still. Denise handed the bailiff the printed screenshots. The judge flipped through the pages as Eli read the words aloud from his copy. Can't wait to be done with that brat so I can get my real life back, Eli read, his voice catching. He looked at the judge. He was talking about me. A gasp came from somewhere in the gallery. Joan shifted in her seat, suddenly pale. Bryce's lawyer turned to him, her mouth slightly open. Bryce? He just sat there, staring at the table, jaw clenched as if it might break. Eli kept going. He cries like a baby, just like his mom. Useless. He looked up again. My mom doesn't cry all the time. She's strong. She helps me when I'm scared. And I'm not useless. Silence. The judge folded his hands. Thank you, Eli. That was very brave. Is there anything else you want to tell me? Eli hesitated, then said, I don't want to live in a place where I feel like I'm a problem. I just want to feel safe. And that was it. He walked back to me and I pulled him close, whispering, You did perfect. He clung to me a little tighter than usual, his small body pressed against mine, and I couldn't help but wonder if he could feel. The storm brewing, the judge's voice broke the tension. Mr. Carter, he called sharply, locking eyes with Bryce. Do you have any explanation for these messages? Bryce opened his mouth to speak, but his lawyer immediately jumped in, requesting a brief recess. The judge's response was swift and decisive. I've seen enough, he said, his tone final. The court's responsibility is to act in the child's best interest. Based on the evidence, the testimony, and this child's remarkable honesty today, I am awarding full physical and legal custody to Miss Carter. I didn't cry. Not there. Not in that moment. Instead, I closed my eyes, exhaled slowly, and held on to the weight of it all. Bryce didn't fight back. He stared at the floor, trapped by his own lies. Joan stood up, ready to leave, her optimism shattered like a broken plate. And Eli? I could barely hear the words over the rush of adrenaline and relief. He reached for my hand, his eyes wide with hope. "Can we get pancakes now?" he whispered, his smile a flicker of light in a sea of shadows. I laughed, a sound that felt foreign, but so good. Absolutely. The drive home was quiet, save for the wind rushing through the open window, Eli's hair dancing with it like nothing had changed. Like he hadn't just exposed the deepest, darkest part of his father in front of strangers, like he hadn't altered the course of both our lives. But that's how kids are. They bounce back, even when they shouldn't have to. We stopped at a diner, and I kept my promise. Pancakes. Eli ordered his with whipped cream and chocolate chips, his eyes lighting up with joy, and I sat there, watching him, unable to look away. The way he held his fork like a spoon, the little laugh that slipped out when the syrup bottle squeaked. Every tiny detail was a reminder of how much I had been holding my breath, waiting for this moment. "I did okay?" he asked, mid-bite, his voice thick with syrup. "You did better than okay," I answered, my voice thick too. "You told the truth. That's the bravest thing anyone can do." He smiled, his mouth full of pancakes, looking like a champion. And in a way, he was. 2 weeks later, the final court documents arrived. Full custody, no more battles. Supervised visitation only for Bryce, pending a therapist's evaluation. That meant he wouldn't see Eli anytime soon, if ever. Not unless he made a complete, impossible change. But he didn't. Bryce disappeared almost overnight. No calls, no texts, no attempt to fight. His lawyer dropped him, and Joan never called. The last I heard, he'd moved across the state, starting over with someone new, leaving behind the wreckage of his past. I guess that's what cowards do. They run. At first, I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. Maybe Bryce would find a loophole or somehow twist things again. But the silence stretched on, and in that silence, something amazing happened. Eli began to heal. He started drawing again. Not little sketches, but full comic strips, vibrant and wild, filled with colorful characters. In one, he made me the hero, a cape-wearing mom who saved the day with waffles and truth. I hung it on, the fridge like it belonged in a gallery. Eli started sleeping through the night again. No more sneaking into my bed at 2 a.m. with nightmares. He laughed more, his questions returning with wonder. About space, about the ocean, about dinosaurs. The spark was coming back. And me? I started to breathe again. Real, deep breaths. I picked up new clients, worked better hours, and even started saving for things I never thought I'd be able to afford, like soccer cleats and piano lessons. I joined a book club. Nothing flashy, just women like me, tired but healing, strong, in ways we hadn't realized before. People ask if I hate Bryce, if I'd take him back to court if he tried to show up again. The truth is, I don't hate him. I don't have room for that. What I feel is sadness. For the father Eli could have had and never will. For the man who could have been someone's safe place, but chose control instead. For the boy inside him who never learned how to love without using it as leverage. But I don't carry that weight anymore. I stopped the day Eli stood up for himself and told the truth. I still talk about that day in court, not because it was dramatic or victorious, but because of what it meant. It meant Eli's voice mattered. It meant that a child could be heard and believed, not dismissed because he was young or small or told what to think. It meant the cycle stopped with us. If there's one thing I want anyone watching this to know, any mother who feels erased, any child who feels unseen, it's this. You are not powerless. Not when you have the truth. Not when you have love, and definitely not when you have courage. Bryce took the dog. He thought he was walking away with something clean, something easy. But he left me the kid. And let me be clear. I got the better deal, because my son is brave. He's honest. He's growing up knowing that love doesn't come with conditions, and that kindness is never a weakness. That courtroom didn't just change a custody agreement. It gave my son back his voice. And it gave me back my life. If this story moved you, even a little, please give this video a like. It helps more people find it, especially those who might be going through something similar and need to know they're not alone. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Maybe you've been through a custody battle. Maybe you were the kid in the middle. Or maybe you just want to send some love to Eli. Whatever it is, your voice matters here. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. I share real stories that shine a light on resilience, family, and the quiet strength it takes to speak the truth, even when it's hard. Thanks for watching. Take care of yourself, and take care of your people.